that we mind the rules of the court, or in the, sorry, did I say court, the chambers, and that's that we don't cheer, we don't boo, we don't make comment. We allow the person 10 minutes to make their case, and then we move forward. It just makes it easier for all of us if we all just sort of follow the rules. It prevents me from having to stop the proceedings, interrupt, et cetera, et cetera. So if both sides in the room today could just respect the rules, it would be greatly appreciated, and we'll get through and hear the public's opinion, which is what this is all about tonight. So thank you very much. That vote was regarding a county's emergency care establishment licensing application for 310 Division Street. And it came after a last-minute verbal report. It was noted by other county councillors that there was a significant lack of information made available to county council to truly make an informed decision around such a pivotal and costly decision. I also made it known to the rest of county council and staff that an email from Cobourg staff addressing the 4 exemptions requested was provided in detail and submitted for county council's consideration, and I asked for to see it. For clarity, 1 exemption request was granted, 1 request was granted with a condition, and 2 exemption requests which were denied. However, my request to have this piece of correspondence made available did not happen prior to county moving forward with the vote. In that term, I want to address a narrative that has been created in this community, and one that I believe is exceptionally misguided and very harmful. That is that the town of Cobourg's ECE bylaw is to blame for the delay in 310 Division opening its doors on time. The town of Cobourg's ECE bylaw should not and is not onerous and does not impose any unnecessary restrictions on emergency care establishments. What it does do is set requirements relating to health and safety by ensuring ECEs meet stable, specific, and identifiable standards of service for all residents. Individuals that find themselves in crisis and require accommodation should be provided with shelter space that is both dignified and safe. Furthermore, all residents of Cobourg have the right to feel safe in their own community. By working with ECE providers, this licensing program serves to enhance the well-being of Cobourg residents more broadly. It is my view that the town of Cobourg, it is the town of Cobourg's view that none of these standards of service are patently unreasonable or practically impossible to comply with as stated by county staff. They are usual standards required of many not-for-profits who provide health and safety services to our public. We have already proven that the ECE license is attainable. The not-for-profit Transition House is currently licensed in the town of Cobourg. A not-for-profit organization was able to accomplish what a $200+ million organization wasn't. The town of Cobourg staff are always willing to work with applicants to address reasonable exemption requests, and 310 Division will be no different. As a member of the County of Northumberland Council, I would like to officially apologize to the staff of Cobourg for the audacity of my council at that level of government for requesting that staff of Cobourg attend to the Northumberland County Council regarding their ECE bylaw. Cobourg Council, this council here, has provided clear direction to our staff to enforce a bylaw that addresses the significant and immediate needs of our community. And it is something that we as a council and as a community believe in. Counter to what was stated at last Wednesday's county council meeting, I know beyond a reasonable doubt that Cobourg staff have and will always answer numerous questions and will provide guidance to county staff or any ECE provider to provide clarification for their application. As with all their licensing regimes, municipal law enforcement staff approach each application with good intention and a level of reasonableness. Ultimately, County Council's decision was to appeal the town's decision to deny the ECE exemption request for 310 Division. This means we go to a hearing. This means Cobourg tax residents are paying for both the Cobourg defense of the ECE bylaw and a percentage of the costs incurred by the county to challenge that bylaw. So much for the words of helping us reduce the costs. Now, had County Council taken the time to review the detailed report provided by the Director, I believe that they would have seen the reasonings for the exemption denial were not only just, but that they provided a better course of action and would have been would have been able to direct county staff to work. I believe that they would have seen the reasonings of the exemption denial. And had they seen these reasonings, that they would have decided a better course of action would have been to direct county staff to work collaboratively with the town of Cobourg to update the application to 310 division based on the guidance already provided by the Director and Manager of Law Enforcement provided in a letter that was not read to the decision makers. I have called upon my county councillors to demand a stop to this line of communication that they are issuing throughout the community at large. This line of communication insinuates that the town of Cobourg staff, the town of Cobourg, are to blame for the inability of county to obtain a license for 310 division. Both Cobourg Council and our staff want to see operations improve in our shelter services. Nobody wants to see vulnerable people suffering in our streets. Thank you. At this time, we'll move forward. Procedural bylaw. When addressing council, the speaker shall be respectful of all persons and refrain from entering into any cross debate with members of council, town staff, and members of the audience. At this time, we have a delegation 1111 from Mrs. McLean on behalf of Mom Stop the Harm regarding a request to council to rescind the motion from the September 25th, 2024 meeting regarding support of involuntary care for individuals with severe mental health and addictions issue. I would now like to invite Mrs. McLean to come forward to your presentation.
Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Lepik, for receiving my delegation request. To reintroduce myself, I'm Missy McLean, and I'm a resident of Cobourg. I'm an advocate and a board member with the national organization Mom Stop the Harm, and I have the honor of serving residents across Northumberland County as a registered social worker, specializing in the intersections of gender-based violence and family legal and criminal legal systems. My work also focuses on supporting community members who are experiencing criminalization and marginalization because of their experiences of poverty, homelessness, drug use, psychiatric survival, as well as gender, racial, and Indigenous identities. The focus of my delegation this evening is a motion passed by Council last month titled Support of Involuntary Care for Individuals with Severe Mental Health and Addictions Issues. However, before getting into the specifics of the motion, I want to ground my delegation in a spirit of unconditional positive regard and goodwill. Although many are feeling a growing division in the community, I share the belief that we actually have more in common than not, and that we all share a desire and vision to live in a community where everyone can thrive, where we all have our needs met, and where each of us feels a sense of safety and belonging. I believe that behind the motion to support involuntary care, there is a genuine desire to move this community closer to realizing this vision. And I believe that behind this motion, there is a genuine desire to see more significant action taken by the province to benefit all residents, and particularly those who are most marginalized. This is why I felt compelled to come before council this evening to address the motion to support involuntary care, and to urge you to reconsider the motion by offering a guided reflection and some high-level education on the relevant issues. To begin this reflection, I'll start by asking council, what are you really seeking to achieve with the motion in support of expanded involuntary care? What are you really seeking to achieve? Perhaps the answer is that you want to ensure people in life-threatening mental health distress receive treatment and interventions either with or without their consent to uphold everyone's health and safety. Okay. If that's the case, Are members of council aware that Ontario already has such mechanisms in place? The Mental Health Act sets out the powers and obligations of psychiatric facilities in Ontario and includes detailed criteria for apprehension and involuntary admission. For those unfamiliar with involuntary admission, in the context of the legislation, this is when a person is the subject of, most commonly, an application by a physician for psychiatric assessment, or what is more commonly known as a Form 1. This authorizes someone's apprehension by police and detention for up to 72 hours in a psychiatric facility for the purposes of psychiatric assessment. It requires an attending physician to observe and examine the person in order to make one of the following decisions. 1, release the person if the attending physician is of the opinion that the person is not in need of the treatment provided in the psychiatric facility. 2, admit the person as an informal or voluntary patient. Or 3, admit the person as an involuntary patient if the attending physician is of the opinion that the conditions satisfy what is known as the serious harm test. This is where a physician examines a person and has reasonable cause to believe that the person has threatened or attempted, or is threatening or attempting to cause bodily harm to themselves, has behaved or is behaving violently towards another person, or has caused or is causing another person to fear bodily harm for him or herself, or has shown or is showing a lack of competence to care for themselves. The doctor must also be of the opinion that the person is suffering from a mental health disorder that will likely result in serious bodily harm to themselves, serious bodily harm to another person, or serious physical impairment of the person. It's important to share this criteria in order to stress the rigor of the evaluation required for involuntary admission under the Mental Health Act, a practice that is already well established in Ontario. A few more comments on involuntary admission for mental health crises. The motion passed by Cobourg Council made reference to British Columbia, and the connection is appropriate because so many of the concerns regarding involuntary treatment in BC are also present in Ontario. In its analysis of the BC government's announcement to expand involuntary treatment, the Canadian Mental Health Association reported that those seeking voluntary mental health and addiction services report significant closed doors to care and subsequently do not get the care they need at the right time. For those who have experienced involuntary care, there have been concerning accounts out of psychiatric wards across the province, including the inappropriate use of restraints and seclusion rooms, the coercive use of sedation, and a lack of trauma-informed care that has led to further trauma. Earlier this year, Health Justice released a report focused on distressing accounts of gender-based violence experienced during involuntary care. I encourage everyone interested to spend time with the full report, but their research found that, quote, although detention and involuntary treatment have been documented to harm people of all genders, cis and trans girls and women, trans, non-binary, and two-spirit people, and other gender-diverse people may experience disproportionate challenges and harms compared with cisgender men while detained under the Mental Health Act in hospitals and other facilities. Over the last 2 decades in both BC and Ontario, there has been a dramatic increase in reliance on involuntary services, while voluntary services have not kept up with demand. Now back to our guiding question of what Council is really seeking to achieve with the motion in support of involuntary care. Is it to see people who are struggling with their substance use engage with treatment and work towards abstinence-based recovery with or without their consent, again with a view to uphold everyone's health and safety? If yes, unfortunately, there is significant dissonance between the motion, implications for policy, and scientific evidence. In September 2024, the Drug Policy Alliance released its report, The Drug Treatment Debate, Why Accessible and Voluntary Treatment Wins Out Over Forced. This report builds on an already extensive body of peer-reviewed scientific published research looking at the efficacy of involuntary or forced drug treatment. Again, I encourage everyone to take a look at the full report, but for the purposes of this delegation, I'll briefly summarize the findings of why involuntary treatment is not the answer. Involuntary treatment is deadly. Research shows definitively a significant increased risk of opioid overdose death after discharge from involuntary treatment. A study out of Massachusetts found 1 in 3 people who are involuntarily committed for opioid use disorder return to use the very same day they are released. Return to use after a forced period of abstinence in the midst of a toxic drug crisis means more overdose and more death. Involuntary treatment is often harmful in other ways, even when it doesn't kill. Studies show that forced treatment perpetuates systemic racism, disrupts lives, fosters alienation from intended support services, compounds the vulnerability of individuals with substance use disorders, and leaves those detained powerless in the face of potentially harmful treatments. I'm going to have to speed this up. Involuntary treatment is criminalization, rebranded. It is not evidence-based, and it is unethical. So now we're left with the natural question, if not involuntary treatment, then what? I encourage Council to reflect on what I've shared so far this evening and consider a revision to their motion. What if Council instead urged the province to take action to ensure that individuals with mental health and addictions issues have access to voluntary care when necessary and desired? What about championing access to effective, affordable, accessible, and appealing treatment options and support? If we're looking to the provincial government for help, we could very well ask MPP Piccini, in all of his time in office, what has he done to expand and improve mental health and addiction treatment options, supports, and services in Northumberland County? We have no detox beds or public, affordable, bed-based treatment centers in Northumberland County. Our rapid access addiction medicine clinic operates only 1 day a week for 3 hours with a dedicated but overworked staff. Wait lists for mental health supports, healthcare, housing, and programming are months and more often years long. There's plenty of research to show us what does work. We need to call on the province to listen to the experts in healthcare and to follow the evidence. We need expansion of prevention and harm reduction initiatives, and we need expansion of access to treatment services for people who struggle with their mental health and people who use drugs in our community. I appreciate Council receiving my delegation tonight. I hope it's given you more insight into these issues and sparked more curiosity and determination to continue learning more. And I would welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McLean, for your presentation. You talked about the Forum 1 when for the 72 hours hold, and in order to keep them, they would have to be in harm themselves or someone else, causing bodily harm and danger. For me, the reason why I supported this motion that the mayor brought forward was because, in my opinion, they're not in control of themselves. When you're talking to somebody that is high, they're in danger, they're screaming, they're yelling, they're causing danger or bodily harm to everyone around them, whether it be walking out of the streets, whether it be doing anything. They're not also in the right mind to make the correct decisions for themselves. So that's why I supported that motion. If you could tell me why somebody who, which we see daily, every day downtown, who is not in control of themselves and is a harm to everybody else and themselves, why they shouldn't be in a hospital, getting clean off of drugs and getting the supports they need. Voluntary, in 3 days, their body, you know what happens when their body starts getting sick, they leave. I'm not saying everybody, but a good majority of all the time that I've talked to people that are so proud to go into rehab, they can't wait, they go, and they're back out in a day. So to me, if you could tell me why, that they are in control of themselves, please.
Yeah, thank you for the questions, Councillor Bureau. Thank you for the questions, Councillor Bureau. And there's a lot that you've touched on there, and I'll try my best to respond. In terms of the threshold for apprehension and involuntary treatment and being held in a psychiatric facility, I'll defer to medical experts. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a person who evaluates people in those moments. I have personal experience with someone I love who has been apprehended multiple times and has received involuntary care. I think that the characterization that you made of people who are high, I think it's an unfair one. I think that you're drawing on very specific incidences of individuals and making a lot of assumptions about those folks. People,
Sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
I've taken extensive training on how to support people who use drugs, criminalized drugs. One of the things I learned from experts who have been working in this field far longer than me is that oftentimes folks who are exhibiting signs of mental distress and are perceived to be under the influence of certain substances are often in more fear for themselves, and that's what comes across as the distress. There can also be the multiplying complication of perhaps experiencing homelessness and being sleep deprived. If anyone has been sleep deprived before, you know that it can have a dramatic impact on people's well-being. All of this to say, the folks who are exhibiting those symptoms, what you're witnessing in that moment of someone in such intense distress in the street, like you described, is the culmination, in my opinion, of multiple failings of systems over years that has led an individual to that moment. And so, based on the evidence, our response is not to strip that person of their autonomy and human rights and apprehend them like a criminal. Evidence shows that the response that has the most positive impact on that person is to meet them where they are, offer them housing, safe shelter, food security, a livable income, all of the aspects that can raise their experiences of trauma that can impact their substance use. You might be surprised to see the difference in somebody once they've had a safe place to sleep and a place to call their own. It dramatically reduces their drug use and their mental health distress. Am I not answering the questions?
Well, I'll follow up.
Did you want me to address the issue of treatment facilities?
Well, so I guess what I'm confused on the answer is,
Sorry, I just want to be very clear. We're not going to engage in a back and forth.
no, I'm,
A question and then an answer. I just want to be very clear. Thank you, Counselor.
so what I'm confused at is when you see somebody who's using illegal drugs, who's high, who is not in control of themselves, and is causing danger to everyone else around them, that's the issue I have. So to have a non-voluntary person, they're not able to make their own decisions. Going up to somebody like that on the street, and I'm not generalizing, I'm talking about from experience, and from somebody who had an opioid addiction, somebody who was on the fentanyl patches. I've gone through all that, so I understand going through off the addictions. They're not in control of themselves when they're like that. You can't talk to them because I'm on experience from every day. So I don't understand how, I guess part of your answer is going up to somebody who's in that state, which happens regularly, different people, multiple times a day, saying, hey, let me give you an apartment. Hey, let me give you some food. Let me take care of you. They're not even in that right frame of mind. So I don't understand how, on the way of that thinking, that it will end by giving them a house. Because I don't see that at all. I see it. That's my question. I don't see that by giving them food and a house is going to stop the illegal drugs happening. Them taking the illegal drugs. And we've seen it in other different places where, the houses that got closed down on Chipping Park, all those places, they weren't doing good. They were doing drugs, illegal drugs, and a harm to the neighborhoods by stealing, breaking in. So please explain to me on how a voluntary drug rehab would benefit, especially when we do have them, and the people that do go, I know there is a couple of good stories, like Chance addicts over there having, going through rehab, and I get it, some is good, but majority don't want the help. They wake up every day going for their fix. So if you can explain that.
Community members?
Pardon?
Yeah, so Councillor Bureau, there's so much that you just said that I would love to address, and I will address if council wants to meet and have a more in-depth discussion about all the issues that you just raised. If community wants to have a discussion, I'm willing to have that discussion. I'm guessing we don't have time tonight to do that. But, you know, in immediate response, I'll say, and I wasn't there. I don't know your experience. All I can speak from is my experience, the experience of my colleagues who work in the same field as me and who work with people who use criminalized drugs day in and day out. I've taken multiple trainings on how to de-escalate with nonviolent crisis intervention. I work with people who are in psychosis from a variety of reasons. I can do that de-escalation, and I have done. You say you don't know how giving someone a home and food would help them get off drugs. Homelessness, mental health and addiction are not the root causes of homelessness. They are a symptom of poverty and a housing crisis. Oftentimes when people are sleeping outside, they use those drugs as a safety and survival mechanism. Have you tried giving someone an apartment and some food and seeing what it does for their drug use and their mental health? Have you tried it?
Okay, so right away, we're gonna stop now because this is engaging in dialogue. We're literally asking questions of each other and talking to each other in a conversation. Well, I do apologize for the interruption, Ms. McLean. I didn't mean, as I explained prior to the question being asked, let's ensure we do not get into a back and forth, and here we are, into a back and forth.
So with
all due respect, Ms. McLean, one moment, please. I'm just trying to decide how I want to move forward here. Councilor Green, you've had a chance to ask some questions. Ms. McLean, you've had a chance to provide answers. You've had a chance to also let council know that you're willing to meet with them individually or as a group. I think we've had an opportunity to discuss our ideas in an open manner. Councilor Green has asked some very questions that clearly there are some issues and concerns with. I could hear from your tone of voice. So moving forward, in terms of how I want to move forward in this meeting, I'm trying to communicate that I would like to stop this back and forth. If there are any questions that can be asked and answered in a succinct manner, then I would like to move forward. Councillor Burkett, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. The only thing I have to ask is, would the presenter be willing to provide the presentation? I don't know if that's been provided to the clerk already, because I know she wasn't able to get all the information out. Is that something that you'd be able to provide to council?
I'd be happy to provide my speaking notes as well as links to the documents that I've referenced, other published articles in peer-reviewed journals, and any other resources that the council would be interested in receiving.
Sorry, just to follow. Your
Let's
Worship.
follow up and then
So if the presenter could send that to the clerk and the clerk could distribute that to council, I'd appreciate it.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Cleveland, through you to Ms. McLean. One of the items you spoke extensively about was, I have noted the expansion of access to health services. In August, the province announced this implementation, I believe, of 14 or a dozen or so heart hubs. My understanding is inspired by the model that the Mayor of London had introduced. I'm just wondering, from your experience and through your professionalizing the work that you do, how do you find the heart hubs falling within advancing or addressing that expansion of access to health or integrated services?
Thank you for the question. All of us in the field are still getting acquainted with the heart hub model that's being proposed by the province. I will say I welcome any expansion and additional funding and health resources that target mental health and substance use. My concerns with the heart hub model, which are shared by numerous folks, and I'm happy to provide council with letters, documentation, reports, is that one glaring mission from the Heart Hub model is that of access to harm reduction supports in terms of new equipment and the ability to be supported for those who are still using substances to have supervised consumption and treatment services provided. It's a big conversation, it's a big topic. Again, I'm happy to have a more in-depth discussion with council and the public to explore it.
Councilor
Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. Are you aware of a recent resolution that was prepared by the Big City Mayor's Caucus? I believe it was either last Friday or the Friday before, and they touched on some main points. And if you are aware of that, they refer to public safety, intervenor status, prohibition on public intoxication or public use of drugs, support of advancing housing. But one of the items was a review of the Mental Health Act and the Healthcare Consent Act, given the age of them. So if you are aware, I'd appreciate perhaps your perspective on that resolution, because it was quite recent.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I am aware of the, I think it's called the Stop the Crisis, or something along those lines, campaign by the Big City Mayors. The initial announcement that I saw in September really was calling upon the province to expand healthcare, housing, treatment. The call for a review of the Mental Health Act, I can't speak to it. The call for, I think it was to have the province intervene in any legal cases regarding encampments. I say this not to be deflective, it's complicated. And my initial response is that, again, we are focusing on an issue of a housing crisis and poverty, and focused on the substance use and mental health without addressing the root issues. And that's what I'd like to see the Big City Mayors and all involved continue to focus on. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much for your delegation.
Thank you.
Okay with you? I'm gonna ask, I don't feel I need education. I feel we disagree. And I feel that oftentimes you come in here thinking that you are going to educate us as some knowledgeable professor to teach us things that we're unknowledgeable of. I'm aware of your position. I just disagree with it. And I find it telling, Ms. McLean, I guess the question here is, where were you when $2.7 million was gifted to this community from the province of Ontario that went to asset classes in the county instead of actually helping our most vulnerable? Another question. Why is it you're here delegating to us about a lack of social services when you don't show up to the county to do the same, when it's their mandated, legal, and funded responsibility? Why is it you continue to come to the lower tier who has no mandate, no obligation, and no funding or specialists to address social services, yet I don't see you in 2 years at the county, the level that is actually not doing a good enough job. So I guess my question is, why do you keep coming here and then you don't actually go help me have that fight at the county?
Yeah, I'm afraid your worship missed my appearances at County Council previously and the communication sent to them. I'm here this evening to address Cobourg Council because the focus of my delegation is specifically the motion that was passed by Cobourg Council. If Northumberland County also passes or engages in conversation around calls for an expansion of involuntary care, I will certainly be attending to make a similar delegation. I'm also willing to provide your worship with a copy of my CV and credentials to speak to the level of education and training and experience that I have, that I think gives me more than enough credibility to come before this council to offer, in, again, a spirit of goodwill, information and education about these incidences. I'll go back to when the motion was passed. My sense was that council did not have adequate time, and some felt that they did not have enough education about the issues to make a vote on the motion. And that's why I felt it was important to come here and speak on the record about these matters.
Thank you. Appreciate answering the question. Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move forward with an option. I asked the member of council to provide either option 1 or option 2 as forward as a mover. Councilor Ton? Oh, one other question. Sorry, I thought no one had questions, that's why I asked. I don't think it's a question.
My understanding is that we have a second delegation on the same topic, and I'm just wondering if we could, we don't, oh, okay.
What we do, it's a separate motion. So there will be the first motion based on the first delegation, and then a second motion based on the second delegation. There are 2 separate delegations, Councillor. Delegation 11.1 and then a delegation 11.2, each requiring a separate motion.
If I may, a request for clarification from you then, so it's on the same topic.
One is a motion to move forward to either rescind or not, and then the other is a motion similar. So if you noticed in the, sorry not to go through, but just there are different motions, and I am following the agenda as per printed. So at this time, thank you, Ms. McLean, I do appreciate your presentation and taking the time to answer questions. At this time, I'd like to look to council to move either the first motion or the second motion. And I'm open to who would like to move. Councilor Bureau.
I'll move for the first motion for information purposes.
So the move is the first that council received delegation for information purposes. Any seconder of that motion? Thank you, Councillor Darling. We are now on the floor with the first notion that this will be received for information purposes. Is there anyone to speak or have concerns regarding this? By all means, Councillor Tom.
Yes, just briefly, Mr. Mayor. I had an opportunity to view a panel discussion that was on TV Ontario, and it was some of the big city mayors with regards, and one of the mayors actually is someone who's had experienced homelessness and addiction issues. It was a very, very good discussion, and the discussion helped me understand some of the aspects involved, and in that regard, I will support the motion that's on the floor.
Noted, Councillor Ton. I think it's good to remember that no one person ever speaks for any side of an argument. I think it's a good point to remember. Any other questions or concerns at this time? Seeing none, all in favor? So moved. At this time, we will move on to the crowd. At this time, no cheers of support and or other forms of noise making will be allowed. Have a great 10 minutes. Mike Source.
Good evening, Mayor Cleveland, councillors and members of the public. I learned a new term recently, anosognosia. Anosognosia is a neurological condition caused by damage to the brain and is seen in those with severe mental illness caused by illegal drug use and repeated overdoses. Studies have shown that opioids, cannabis, stimulants, and hallucinogens trigger or exacerbate mental illness. Severe mental illness is exhibited by symptoms such as ADHD, OCD, PTSD, panic disorder, and antisocial behavior, to list only a few. People with anosognosia have no idea they are ill. It is a condition where there is an impaired ability or refusal to recognize a defect or disorder that is clinically evident. Experts describe this a denial of deficit. There have been 47,162 deaths in Canada since 2016 due to illegal drugs. Over 600,000 have suffered drug-related brain injuries. How can groups such as Moms Stop the Harm support providing illegal drugs to addicts? How can anyone with compassion condone a second winter of living in a tent at Brookside? What kind of life is this? The way to stop the harm is to eliminate the consumption. drugs rather than making illegal drugs available. During the last 14 months of living in close proximity to the encampment of Brookside, I have followed the completely ineffectual efforts of the County of Northumberland and other social services to provide assistance. I have suffered from the resulting social disorder and crimes such as theft, open drug use, observing assaults, public defecation, mischief, littering, and outright defiance of long-established social mores. I fully support involuntary care for individuals with severe mental health and addictions issues. Having human rights is one thing, but allowing a few to cause utter chaos in a small community such as Cobourg is unacceptable. Organizations condoning illegal drug use such as Mom Stop the Harm are a huge part of the problem and the resulting social disorder in Cobourg. I fully support the motion passed by the majority of Town Council sending a letter supporting involuntary care for individuals with severe mental health and addictions issues, as well as withdrawing any form of support to misguided and destructive groups such as Mom Stop the Harm. Thank you, Vivian Van Den Hazel.
I just want to add a few things here and put things into context. The motion is by a municipal Tier 2 municipality that represents the people of Cobourg. And we had individuals coming here and giving us our individual stories, and I have one as well, where my brother was involuntarily put into psychiatric ward after 3 bouts of psychosis, saved his life and saved me from losing a brother. We all have stories like this, and if we don't, we know someone who does. What we're talking about here is the involuntary mandatory requirement for severe cases. We're not talking about going around and picking up people off the street just because they're acting funny. We're talking about an individual who I know, who I've approached, who basically I found out walked 6 kilometers and is living in a ditch on the side of a rural road because she doesn't know any better. That's real. And that's what we're talking about, is the intervention, the compassionate intervention when individuals are living in ditches or are in situations of crisis that they can't do anything by themselves. It is the exception, not the rule. And what we're talking about here is this level of government reflecting the beliefs, the values, and the compassion of the residents they represent. And as you can see, this is the way of advocacy, where we sit down in close quarters and show you data and convince all of you that one organization is right to the detriment of the community that you people represent. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that this motion, as it stands, reflects the general majority, the silent majority of the citizens of Cobourg who have been enduring this for more than 400 and now 30 days. This level of government has no power to impose this. What you are doing is sending a signal to the organizations like Mom Stops the Harm that their reign in regards to influencing public policy at this level of government by closed-door sessions and education is over. Thank you.
Excuse me, I can't thank you. I really appreciate it. We almost got through the negative notes. Thank you very much for the presentation. At this time, if there's any questions of council of either of the presenters? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please and thank you. Moving forward, as the council, again, we have 2 options. 1 to receive for information, 2 to send back the report. May I have a member of council, by Councillor? No? Option 1 to receive for information purposes on the floor. Do I have a seconder at this time? Thank you, Councillor Burkett. It's on the floor. Any future discussion, concerns, questions regarding this? Seeing none, all in favor? So moved. Before we move on to on-site presentation, I'm going to take a 10-minute break, so we will reconvene here at 1:45. Thank you very much.
Like on the crossing guard and
Just my brain
not safe where it is, but there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
I need someone to take care of my financial.
Got it.
It all kind of makes sense here.
Yeah,
You don't
definitely.
have to rent or